This week's episode of the Autoblog Podcast is brought to you by the Autoblog Daily Digest. It's a great way to stay updated with what's happening in the world of cars in just 2 or 3 minutes every day. Ask your smart speaker for the Autoblog Daily Digest to stay up to speed with the latest car news, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today is consumer editor Jeremy Korzeniewski. How are you?
I'm doing really good. It is in the upper 70s today and perfectly sunny out.
Nice. It is 62. It was 42 about 2 hours ago, and I hear it's going to be 82 in about 3 or 4 hours.
Nice.
So we are going through basically 2.5 seasons here in Michigan. Sounds like you're doing the same thing down in Ohio. It's a fun time of year. I like this.
It's great.
I actually just discovered a new Yeti tumbler that was at the back of my coffee mug cabinet this morning. So it's really a pretty good Tuesday, not going to lie.
Finding a new Yeti tumbler kind of elevates your Tuesday from so-so to immediately better than most, right?
I'm not sure it's new. I just think it's new to me. I think it's one of those things where you get something like, a gift and then it falls to the back and then you're like, hey, what's this? Too bad it doesn't have a lid, but it doesn't really matter. I'm sitting indoors and kind of the good thing to drink around the campfire, maybe.
There you go.
Warm or cold. But we're going to talk about more than the weather and random tumblers. It's a big show for you guys all today. We're going to talk about the new Toyota 86 and the Subaru BRZ, which actually came out back in November, but it's a good time to kind of mop it all up. Jeremy and I have slightly different opinions, so I think it's going to be fun to talk about that. We're going to talk about the EV tax credits / rebates that have been sort of floated, discussed. Trying not to get too political, but we are going to talk about what it might mean and what we think and how it could work. I've been driving the Mazda CX-30, the Premium Plus. It's very nice. It's got the turbo engine, very nice interior, a lot of stuff going on with it, but still priced quite competitively. And Jeremy actually came up to Ann Arbor, Michigan last week and drove the Mitsubishi Outlander. And what else did you drive? The Eclipse Cross?
That's correct. Yeah, the 2022 versions of both.
We will then discuss the latest used car listing. That's an area of the site Jeremy has been overseeing. He's got one of my favorites, an early 2000s GTO. One of my favorites. I'll leave it there. And then we do have an update on Spend My Money. And then Jeremy's going to throw just a little bit more dirt in the stream to try to muddy the waters. And we're having fun. This is good. So let's go. There's a new sports car. It's the Toyota 86. It looks a lot like the old sports car, formerly known as the Scion FRS. Obviously, it's twinned with the Subaru BRZ. Car was revealed yesterday on Monday. Today's Tuesday. It was kind of a slow news day, so it was great to actually say, hey, one of our sort of enthusiast favorites is out there. So we have the car. Check it out. Check out the pictures. Freelancer Roman Glon handled it for us right off the top. I came back with the second hit for a variety of reasons. One, this is very serendipitous. I was thumbing through an old notebook this summer, and one of the first things I wrote in it was these impressions of the 86 that I had driven late July, early August. And I jotted down a bunch of impressions and never quite had enough to turn it into a story. Maybe this happens to you, Jeremy. You get a car, you don't have an assignment per se or a deadline, and it gets as this tends to happen with writers, you don't tend to get it done. There was really nothing to do, if you will. Anyways, I had maybe a third of a story worth of impressions. Then I had some opinions, and lo and behold, I kind of had a little bit of an opinion piece here. I guess that's how the sausage gets made here. But my point is I think it was good. They held the course, stayed the course, held serve, pick your cliche. A little bit more horsepower. It's up to 232. That's just converting it from the specifications for the domestic market in Japan, but we think it's going to be about that here in the United States. That's about 4 more than Subaru's BRZ, which is 228, which is up considerably from 200 or 205, depending on if you get the automatic or manual transmission the current car has. Engine's a little bit bigger, goes from 2 liters to 4 liters. Still no turbo or anything like that, but of course it's, rock solid chassis, 6-speed manual transmission, and the car looks almost identical. I mean, you got to really look to see the big differences here. And they didn't even, in the press release, they didn't even highlight anything that was all that different, which usually companies will be like, wow, look at these mirrors inspired by the 1964 Ford Galaxy, or these headlights that throw back to the something, from the 1930s. And a lot of it's just kind of colorful writing. They didn't even bother to do that. They're just like, yeah, here's the car. It's slightly different. I'm okay with it. I will say this, the 86 and the BRZ are among my favorite cars. I think if I was not an automotive journalist and didn't have access to testing out cars, which is a lot of work, but also a privilege, this is a car I would look at. I get into a little bit more about, could this be a daily driver? My sort of prescription is, well, that depends on what your commute is. If your commute is through the open rolling hills of England, yeah, maybe it could. If your commute is through downtown New York, no, it's not, But overall, I'm okay with what they did. I think they could have been more dramatic. I think they could have done some things, but sure, I'm all right. But I think you have a bit of a different take.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say I'm super happy that that Subaru and Toyota kept this joint venture going and has come out with a second generation of the 86 BRZ platform. So don't get me wrong, I think it's great, and I would rather live in a world where these sport coupes exist as opposed to not existing. I guess my issue that I take with these vehicles is that they're just not differentiated enough, and they don't stand out enough that I think they're going to be a sales success. I mean, the big issue that the Duo has had is that they just don't really sell in very good numbers, which is what made us wonder if there was even going to be a second generation to start out with. There is, and I think that's great. So apparently there was enough interest to spend the development money and keep it around. But I don't see this update being the thing that rights the ship and makes these into a long-term viable prospect on the market. I look at the BRZ and 86 and even the Scion FRS as an awesome used car buy. We actually covered the twins in a previous version of our used car spotlight. We'll talk about the most recent one later on. They're an awesome used buy for $10,000 because I don't think a whole lot of people are going to use these cars as the daily driver. They are very elemental, and I think that's good for them that they are. There's just not that many buyers out there that are looking for this kind of vehicle. I think they could potentially attract a little bit more attention from buyers if they were more outrageously styled. I don't want to say that they're boring looking, but I will say that you could drive one right through a city center without attracting much attention, unless it's painted yellow or something like that. That's immediately eye-grabbing. But yeah, I mean, put one in blue or red or white or black and drive it right down a busy main street, and no one's going to be paying any attention to you. They would definitely fly under the radar. So they're not going to attract the young buyer looking for something ostentatious. They will get the younger buyers who want to stance them, put spoilers on them, put body kits on them. But that's just a really small segment of the marketplace. So while I love the cars and think it's awesome that they exist, and I absolutely will recommend them to people, to the right buyer, I just don't think that this update is what is going to turn these vehicles into a resounding success in the marketplace. Also, to get back to the styling for a minute, walk into a Toyota dealership and you'll be hit over the head by expressive styling. Everything from the Camry to the Avalon even, especially the TRD versions. Look at the Sienna and the Highlander. They've got this very expressive styling. And, I'll be the first to admit that I don't really love that styling language. However, it's very aggressive. And I keep using that word expressive. That's what it is. The 86 isn't. And if one vehicle is really going to stand out in the showroom, shouldn't it be the sports coupe?
So I think that's where the Supra comes in, which I think is a little over the top. And I think that's definitely more of a halo car for Toyota. I'll agree with you that they're not doing enough to make this like a star, if you will. I was looking up the sales figures, and the Toyota Mirai has outsold the 86. I forget if it was either this year or in March. I'm mixing up which figures, but it was beating the 86 for at least a recent time period. So I think that illustrates that, yeah, I mean, there is a pretty small market for these things when a car that's like a hydrogen fuel cell that has like very little infrastructure is outperforming its sales charts.
And it's only for sale in California, right?
Yeah.
To your point though, Greg, these are exciting cars. They're great to drive. I absolutely recommend them to automotive enthusiasts. My concern is that they're again going to fly under the radar. They're not going to sell enough to, for Subaru and Toyota to go in and do the things that we've been asking for them to do, make special editions, make them more exciting, maybe even add that turbocharger that we've all been wanting, even though I would argue it doesn't really need it, especially with the power update. It's 0 to 60s in the mid 6 second range now with the update, which is like a full second quicker than they used to be. So I don't really think power is the issue, but for those people that want a BRZ STI or something, I just don't think that they're going to sell enough to attract the investment that I think that the platform deserves. So that's my disappointment with them. Not that I don't like the cars and not that I'm not excited by them. I just don't see this as the thing that pushes them into that realm of like, okay, we're not going to be talking about the 4th and 5th generation versions like we do the Miata. They might end here in the 2nd generation, and that'd be a shame.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the business case you lay out is definitely spot on, because they clearly didn't do enough to attract new buyers to this fold. Depending on what the electric future, autonomous future looks like, I mean, this is the Stegosaurus, the, Spinosaurus of, part of the automotive world right now. I do think this as an electric car could be very compelling just because It's already such a compact and lightweight frame, 2,900 pounds. I think you said 0 to 60 is somewhere around like 6 something now, 6.3. Before it was actually like in the 7s, which is pretty uncompetitive actually. I mean, I love driving them. I love like the shifting, the chassis dynamics. I've actually always liked how they looked, because I do feel like there's a bit of the dash to axle proportions, the ratio. I mean, just that long hood, the headlights, the tapered back, the low roof. To me, this is like a modern 1960s sports car, and I compared this in the opinion piece I wrote to just like everything from the E-Type to the Datsun Z cars to even the 2000 GT, which is what Toyota sort of loosely traces its lineage to when it kind of, made up a history for this car, if you will.
Right.
But some of it's, I mean, there is a path, if you will, to it. I mean, what I like about it too is I kind of like minimalism in a lot of areas of my life. Like I'm more like, I'm really into watches. So I'm more like either a dive watch or a field watch kind of guy. I'm not going to walk around wearing like, a gold Rolex or something, or like, I like the minimalism. I like the rubber or the canvas strap for the watch. And when I look at this car, that's like the equivalent I see, if you will, I could definitely see a world though, where they did style this thing up, make it more of like, especially with like social media and trying to like, what's the next TikTok? What's your influencer going to say? I mean, this car is very anonymous, for sure. Even if you get like the wheels or some of the extra or if you did take it to the aftermarket and do some things to it. But yeah, it's pure. I like it. I think yesterday we had a good discussion in Slack where some people were talking about comparing it to like a Buick or something. I like from the back end, and I will admit the back end, it does get pretty, vanilla back there. But, I think I think there's a lot of people that not only think it's kind of anonymous, but also don't even particularly like the looks of the car. At least that was kind of reading the Slack room yesterday. Like, well, geez, like this was just so-so before, and now it's like really so-so because they had a chance to redo it and they didn't.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there are detractors. I think that the basics of the car's design, the silhouette, like you said, the dash to axle ratio, it's very reminiscent of classic quintessential sports cars, and I think that's good. I also have to admit, when it was pointed out to me by some of our colleagues, that it very much from behind looks like a mid-2000s Buick Regal. And you can't deny it. Like you look at it and you're like, yeah, I guess it does. And I don't think you really want your sport coupe, looking like a mildly sporty entry-level luxury sedan. But that said, I don't fall into that camp that like is detracting the vehicle based on its looks. I think it looks good and I like it. I just think it really needs to be more expressive if it's going to get showroom traffic and actually get people to remember that it exists when it's time for them to go Mustang or Camaro shopping, because it's a great car. And yeah, I don't think that this refresh or redesign goes far enough to make it into a marketplace success. That's my big criticism.
So let's leave it there and let's talk some politics. Not politics, but let's get into the part of President Biden's infrastructure plan is we could see more money for electric cars and infrastructure. The infrastructure plan is like so far right now from actually like becoming reality, but one of the elements of it was you might get more rebates, there might be more tax incentives for all of the things that go along with electric cars. I'm curious now, as you kind of lay this out, what piece of this do you think would maybe spur electric vehicle sales?
I think one thing that would definitely help is turning the rebates from tax credits to an actual point of sale discount. And the tax rebate has a lot of benefits from the government side. Part of it is that it looks great on paper, but not everyone will qualify for the full amount. It really depends on how much money you earn and what your total tax liability will be at the end of the year. The more money you make and the larger tax liability you have, the bigger chances are that you'll get that full up to $7,500 rebate. And I think there are ways around that. One of the ways is by leasing the vehicle, letting the dealership or automaker benefit from the tax rebate and just taking the lower monthly payments. That is an option, but that's not an option that everybody's going to want. So for me, if there's one thing that could potentially spur EV ownership, it would probably be moving from a total tax rebate to a point of sale discount. And there's a lot of things that will help. The number of chargers will help, and just the number of choices, which is going to happen organically as more automakers enter the space. All that's going to help. But if we're talking about what the government can do to spur sales, I would talk about that initial discount.
I would agree with you because I am like mildly in the market for an electric car. We're looking around. We're thinking of replacing our SUV with maybe a minivan, and the Pacifica as a plug-in hybrid. But to your point, again, like it's an up to $7,500 tax credit, but you got to pay that much in taxes for starters. You've got to be really on the ball with your tax guy and your accountant to make sure all this stuff works. The rebate is definitely appealing as someone who, like I said, is perhaps an EV customer. For any EV as well, just in general, like, I see some other ones that are coming online in the next couple of years, and you're like, well, that's interesting. I might want to drive that, or at least put that in my garage and, consider owning that. That being said, again, the tax credit part gets a little tricky. A rebate, I do think, could help. My only concern with that is I wonder if, like, prices are kind of in an artificial level right now. Like, it seems like automakers have no problem charging you like 40 grand for an electric car that in, like, internal combustion guys would be like 30 grand. So it feels like they're more than willing to, like, make you pay for the costs. Okay, that's the way the world works. I don't have a problem with that, but the price points right now for electric cars are still a little tricky in many cases. You're definitely paying for the electric technology, whereas you probably wouldn't pay for, like, equivalent 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder technology. Most people don't have a problem paying more for a V8, which is sort of not, that's probably not the way the world is going, but just sort of looking at shopping habits. And then, like, two other parts that sort of go hand in hand. I think the more you can incentivize infrastructure build out, however you can do that, I don't have the answer. But I've had, in the last, like, say 6 weeks, I've had the ID4 and the Mach-E. And just the way it's worked, the loans have been pretty short for review purposes. And, I haven't really had to charge them. I just charged them both using, like, the portable chargers from my garage. With the Mach-E, you actually could, if you had, like, a stronger outlet, charge it very respectably, and that might be all you need. With the Volkswagen, it's really more like a charger that's more like not having the battery go dead or something if you're in a pinch, because it's really not that strong. But like, some utility companies are offering rebates, like Consumers Energy in Michigan offers you $500 to install a level 2 charger. So, I'm not an economist here. So however you can maybe, like, spread that out to different entities to incentivize, I think that helps. That, again, for me is like, well, wait a minute. Okay, I could install a level 2 charger. I get $500 off one. Just using the Ford as an example, the one for the Mach-E is like $799. Okay, sure, I can swing $300 for a charger that's going to save me how much on gas.
Right.
So all this kind of goes into the calculus and the purchase decision. And I do think you got to make it more straight cash, to incentivize people. Like, I think rebates would work better than taxes. And I think you can also actually leave the tax equation in there, especially for people who like I know people who are, like, not into talking about their taxes. They don't want to, like, spend time with their financial people. Like, that's a tough thing to really get into, where if it's like, hey, the car costs $36, you're getting $4,500 back from whomever, that's a lot easier to understand. And then the last part, which is, to me, the murkiest part, is we just need more infrastructure. Like, to go back to those two EVs I was driving, I was just looking around like, okay, so there's an Electrify America station here. Okay, here's a charge here that's public access. Great. Do I want to go there? Is it going to work? There's a little bit more guesswork right now, as opposed to, I've got a quarter tank. There's a Sunoco on my corner. And that's all the brain cells you got to spend on it. So
right. Yeah. No, all your points I think are really great. And the more times I discuss it, the more I'm reminded that we're at this new spot in the automotive industry where electric vehicles are in their infancy. And we were here, decades ago in the gasoline industry, when, not turn of the century, after that, 20s, 30s, 40s, where, car companies were really starting to get this gasoline engine thing down. And they came up with their plans on, the cheap entry-level vehicle, the stepping stones all the way up to the really good one. And one thing that they never had to consider with that was range, because at the same time that Americans were buying vehicles powered by gasoline, the infrastructure was being built by a capitalist society with big corporations trying to make money and capitalize on it. It's different now because gasoline already exists. It's already a mature technology. There's, I don't even know, let's, throw out, a million gasoline stations across the United States. I don't even know what the number is, but plenty, I guess, is the right word. And that's in competition right now with electricity. Whereas when gasoline was established as the main entity, there wasn't competition from a legacy technology.
And there were horses.
Well, sure, yeah, there were horses. And it's just difficult right now because every time a car company has tried to roll out an inexpensive entry-level EV, there's been so much wrong with it that it hasn't worked. People think of the Mitsubishi IMEV, IMIEV. It was a very bare bones, it was better than an electric golf cart in that it had all the safety technologies and airbags and stuff that you want. But it kind of drove like an electric golf cart. Every time a company has tried to capture that low end market, they've done it with a product that just isn't good enough. And then Tesla comes along and they get everyone to expect muscle car performance, name cachet, and super high technology with screens all over the place. And I don't want to say that that's a disservice to the marketplace, but now every new car that comes out, like the VW ID4 and the Ford Mustang Mach-E, that are realistic cars that people would choose to drive every day, they're loaded with all this tech. They need to go 250, 300 miles on a charge. And to make that happen, they've got to cost at least $40,000 and up. And that $25,000 EV that has so far been completely elusive in the United States is going to remain that way because there is everything that we've talked about up to this point. Tesla can't do it yet. They're talking about it. Ford can't do it yet because they've got to come out with the vehicle that competes with what's already there. And I think until we hit that point where gasoline and electric vehicles, battery technology is progressed, or it doesn't have to progress any further because the charging isn't an issue and range anxiety isn't a thing, until there's actually some level of parity and sticker prices, I don't think that EVs are really going to take off in the marketplace like most people want them to do. So it's a really transitionary time in the industry where it's going to take many more years before an EV is literally on everybody's shopping list alongside the gasoline counterpart.
Thank you, Senator. Your comments will be reflected on the record, and we'll move on. Let's talk some cars.
Let's do it.
Start off with the Mazda CX-30. I drove this. It actually just left my house yesterday. Spent a week in it. Drove it quite a bit, actually. Took it downtown, put some miles on it. I mean, not a ton, but I actually stretched it out a little bit. It's a really nice car. Mine was shade of white with black wheels and then the black wheel arches. Inside was kind of brown and like a tan brown and black too. So really nice looking car, very sharp. This is sort of, in simple terms, it's almost like a lifted Mazda, like Mazda 3. Yeah, it's not all that different. Very competitive. Like you could get one as low as like 2,300, or excuse me, 23,000. like front wheel drive, just the base 4-cylinder. I had the turbo, which is quite nice. It gives you plenty of get up, if you will. Let's see trying to find my spec. I had a very high spec, and here it is. It was about one like mine would be about $35,620, 2.5 turbo premium plus. So you get a lot of stuff there. Again, the nice leather interior, a lot of electronic stuff, all-wheel drive, and it's pretty potent. I think the turbo is something that you at least want to consider. You may not want to spend the money for it, but you get 250 horsepower and like I want to say 310 pound-feet of torque, so you can move in this thing. It's a very nice crossover. It's very competitive. It's a bit of a tweener. It kind of competes between like all sorts of different things. Like it's called, I think, a subcompact, but it's really not. It's a little bit bigger than that. Good steering. Chassis is Mazda-like for this segment. The naming is a little weird. CX-30. It doesn't totally fit in with some of the other ones, but I really liked it. It's really competitive. You get a lot of car for the money. The only hang up is for almost 36 grand. It's still not that big, if you will. Like you can kind of step up to some larger like SUV crossover type things in this price range. But I mean, even in base trim, it's a very nice, like, it could even be like a first car out of college for some people, for like 23 grand, in which case you're getting a pretty Spartan interior, but you're getting still a very nice little crossover. So yeah. I liked it. Pretty nice.
Yeah, I would say for people who prioritize enjoyment behind the wheel, Mazda is really your go-to brand. They're everything that they make right now, from the Mazda 3 and Mazda 6 to the Mazda CX-3, CX-30, CX-5, CX-7, or excuse me, CX-9. Everything that they make is the driver's choice in its segment. CX-30, no different. It's good that they did it because the Mazda 3 is one of the best driving cars that you can. I mean, just forget the segment that it's in, forget its price point. It's really a joy to drive. The CX-30, they have to chase that segment, the crossoverized segment. They need a car with the all-wheel drive and the slight body lift and the cladding on it, because that's what people are buying. If that's what it takes to get people into something based on the Mazda 3, then so be it. Great platform, great car, love the turbocharged engine. Even without it, still just a really, really nice vehicle to steer and just to enjoy driving in. So yeah, I'm a big fan. I wish that Mazda could really gain a foothold and sell more vehicles based on the fact that they're the driver's pick. They're also very attractive. If you line them up next to all their peers, like that's the one that draws your eye. I don't exactly know why they don't sell more. I mean, fewer dealerships, less marketing money. It's not in your face everywhere like a Ford, Chevy, Honda, or Toyota. So I'm sure that has something to do with it. But just if you're in the segment, just you owe it to yourself to pop into your nearest Mazda dealership, even if it's a little bit further away, and just check out what they've got, because they're just really good, solid vehicles.
It's definitely, your phrase, the driver's choice, is spot on, and the design is, I think, among the best right now in the industry. I mean, they're really attractive. They managed to make distinctive vehicles that just are really beautiful cars, I think, and crossovers, without resorting to some of the things that you see like Audi and BMW do right now that are like so over the top. So, like the Mazda 6, one of the best looking cars, I think, on the market, and you see that throughout the lineup. So yeah, that's a CX-30. I enjoyed it more than the Mini Countryman I was in the week prior. You got a bunch of different things like the Impreza, the Hyundai Kona, There's a lot of things going on in these sort of like price points, like small crossover type things. But this would be near the top of my list if I were in the market, because it's quite good.
You know what else fits in that segment? The Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross.
Tell me about it.
How's that for a segue, Greg?
It's good.
Yeah, the Eclipse Cross. This is a weird vehicle. It's this segment that everybody is playing in. By everybody, I mean like every car company in America offers a vehicle at this price, offers a crossover at this price point. So you're looking at everything from the Toyota CHR to the Honda HR-V to the Chevy. I mean, they've got several different subcompact crossovers. Ford has the EcoSport and the Escape, and like there's just so many vehicles vying for the same buyers that it's overwhelming, I think, as a car shopper. So I'm gonna simplify this a little bit and talk about the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross versus the Honda HR-V and the Subaru Crosstrek, because some of the entries, like the Toyota, are really small, don't offer all-wheel drive, and I kind of think they're appealing to a different customer. And then others are on the larger side, they've got like inexpensive base models that reach down into the same pricing structure. But even amidst this like really weird amalgam of vehicles, the Eclipse Cross is still weird. It still stands out as odd because it's actually built on the same platform with the same wheelbase as the Outlander, well, the outgoing Outlander that ended in 2020, and the Outlander Sport. They all have a 105.1 inch wheelbase. They're all, and we're used to judging the size of a vehicle based on its wheelbase, but somehow like Mitsubishi's managed to make 3 different crossovers on that same wheelbase size that are marketed to different people and sized slightly differently, but kind of still the same. So I've narrowed it down to the Honda HR-V and the Subaru Crosstrek because those are both rather large vehicles for their segment as well, with plenty of space, cargo and rear seat. I really like the Crosstrek. It's probably the vehicle that I would direct most buyers to in the segment. The Honda HR-V is extremely comfortable, has plenty of space, good sight lines, and it's a Honda, which you expect good reliability, resale value, that kind of thing out of. The big problem that I have with the Crosstrek is that it's boring. It offers very little by way of excitement, no turbocharged engine option. The Honda HR-V, while its bones and guts are very good, it's extremely boring to drive, and it has one of the worst CVT implementations that you're going to come across in America. And I think part of that is because the engine just has almost no torque. So why did I go on this tangent on the Subaru and the Honda when I'm talking about the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross? It's because the Eclipse Cross is actually an interesting alternative to anyone who's shopping for a Subaru Crosstrek or Honda HR-V. It also, the Mitsubishi also has a CVT, but it's paired with a 1.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder with a lot more torque than the Honda. So you don't get like stuck in that constant engine drone in the Mitsubishi that you do in the Honda. So just the act of everyday driving the thing, I would pick the Eclipse Cross before I pick the HR-V because I just can't stand Honda's transmission and engine tuning. It just drives me absolutely insane. The Subaru is really boring, and it's a naturally aspirated engine. in natural flat elevations and in daily driving, you don't really need the turbocharged option in the Crosstrek. But as some of our other colleagues, like Chris McGraw, who lives in Colorado and drives into the mountains all the time, is quick to point out, a naturally aspirated engine might lose 30% of its power once you get up into the mountains, and then it seems extremely underpowered, just like the HRV does. Turbocharged engines don't suffer from that. So again, that's a buying case why someone might choose the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross over a Crosstrek. So I guess this is a long, drawn-out way of saying, don't discount the Mitsubishi just because it's a Mitsubishi and you don't see them very often and it's not one of the big sellers. It actually is a perfectly fine entry. It's competent in all the areas that it needs to be competent in. It actually looks interesting. It has some unique style to it that I think might attract some buyers. And it's just all around more interesting than some of the other vehicles in its segment. All of that said, I don't think that this redesign is going to somehow jettison the Eclipse Cross into a strong sales position. The Crosstrek and the HRV are still absolutely going to outsell it. But I just think, forgetting that it exists, which is what most buyers probably do, is not really fair. It's fully competent. It deserves a look, and especially in its very highest trim level, with the nice leather interior and all the options that it comes with. It's actually kind of compelling. I can see why someone would choose it over some of the cars that drastically outsell it.
I think that's actually a really good point. It's been a while since I've been and really tested any Mitsubishi, but when I have, I've been generally impressed. Just with the variety of the styling is interesting. A lot of times the interiors are decent. And yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. It's the brand is kind of invisible in the US market, but when you get into one, you're kind of like, oh, hey, this is pretty good. I mean, it definitely is a brand that struggles with the perception of, just, not being as good as some of the other brands. But right. I mean, it's, in reality, when you test them, I've found them to be very, very competitive. Not top of class, but competitive. I would take the Honda or Toyota or Subaru that you mentioned over. But I think that's also a reasonable play. I mean, just to speak of the brand, I love the Evo. I'll just throw that in the discussion. But
yeah, when I wrote the first drive, I went into it with the attitude that I think most people have, is that this is going to be uncompetitive, and okay, I'll give it a try. And I was pleasantly surprised, and I knew that when I wrote it up, there was going to be a contingent of our readers that would read my write-up and find that I wasn't super harsh on it, and and that being the news, wow, he didn't bash it. And there was one comment on the Eclipse Crosstrek first drive where someone said something to the effect of, how much money did Mitsubishi pay you to recommend this, and in all caps, deplorable vehicle? And I would love to be able to respond if that person wanted to be actually rational about it. I'd like to respond and say well, let me ask you, have you driven the Honda HRV back-to-back with the Eclipse Crosstrek? Because I actually have. And if you're going to hand me the keys to one of them, I'm going to take the Mitsubishi because it's more interesting. I like the engine a lot better, and the transmission doesn't want to drive me insane. So just based on those little issues, I'll take the Mitsubishi. Plus, it's got a 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. So if you're concerned that it doesn't have the reputation of reliability, which Mitsubishi's reputation for reliability isn't terrible. So like, do I love CVTs? No. Would I take Mitsubishi CVT over Hondas? Absolutely. And like I said, if you live in elevation and are narrowing your choices down to turbocharged engines, then yeah, give the Mitsubishi a fair shot.
Cool. Yeah, now tell us about the Outlander that you also spent a little bit of time in as well.
Yeah, the Outlander was, I went into the Outlander drive expecting it to be pretty darn good, because it now shares the chassis and drivetrain with the brand new Nissan Rogue. The Rogue actually is one of the best sellers in the compact crossover segment. It will continue to be so in its new 2021 iteration. We were talking a little bit ago about Mitsubishi not being particularly competitive, and I think the one area where it was least competitive was in the biggest segment, which is the Outlander compared to a RAV4 or a CRV or an Escape, or pick your favorite compact crossover, or Forester. The big issue with the Outlander was that it shared that same wheelbase with the smaller entries, and it did not have the kind of room inside that its competitors had. That's gone. And I don't think that the compact crossover should be on the same. It's silly to me that that the Outlander and the Eclipse Cross are in very different, trying to attract a very different buyer, but were built on the same guts. It just didn't make sense. The Outlander is should be an altogether larger and frankly better vehicle because it costs more. It finally is that. The chassis is like revolutionarily, that's not a word, but I'm going to use it anyway, better than the 2020 Outlander. It's like, car companies give us like crazy statistics on how much stiffer a new platform is than the last one. And normally it's like, okay, yeah, thank you for the numbers. But actually driving this one, you're like, wow, this is finally a super solid platform. I went through all the press materials and was just like pouring through the data because it was so interesting to me. Everything from the suspension arms to the bushings to the steering rack to like absolutely everything was significantly more rigid than the old one. It's Mitsubishi's first ever front aluminum suspension arms, which you're like, how is that possible? That Mitsubishi didn't have cast aluminum suspension arms before, but they didn't, and now they do. Like, just everything about it is an absolute like sea change over the Outlander that it replaced. I think it definitely deserves attention in the segment, but the one thing that I'll say is it looks very divisive in pictures. When you're looking at it online, like you're seeing this face, it's got like chrome swooshes on it. It's got like a big black grill in between. And I think seeing it in person is really what's required to actually take it in as a cohesive design. It looks much better in the sheet metal when you're standing at eyes height, looking at it, than it does in any of the pictures that you'll see online. And it also drives much better than you'd expect. Honestly, it makes me extremely excited to see what the Outlander PHEV will, how that will come out of the gates. Will it be based on the old model's powertrain technology? Will it still have the the older Mitsubishi engine and powertrain, or will it be a completely different one based on the alliance with Nissan Renault? It's exciting because if Mitsubishi can make a good vehicle out of its Outlander PHEV, I think that's very much the car that could bridge the gap for buyers looking to go green, looking to electrify with a plug-in. Range anxiety is not going to be a thing because it's still got an engine. And if they can give significantly more range than the current model, so that a lot of people are actually driving on electricity only in their day-to-day driving duties, it really could be one of those vehicles that gets a lot of people used to the idea of driving an electric car. Because I think a lot of people have this mindset that they don't want one because of all the reasons that we talk about, whether they incorrectly think that they're just as dirty because the power has to come from somewhere. That's been disproven over and over again. But based on the comments on our own posts and what I read online, a lot of people still believe that myth. Or a lot of people think that they're never going to find the charging station. They're going to think that, well, every once in a while, a couple times a year, I might drive, 200 miles in a day to visit family or something, and they're not going to be able to charge it. That's also not true for most people. 90% of the population can, on those rare instances, spend 30 minutes finding a charger and charging it up with a fast charger. But anyway, going to digress, go back to the current one that's powered by the gasoline engine. It's not perfect. The third seat is extremely small. It's the kind of third seat that's only going to be useful for in a pinch or for very small people. Because if you slide the middle row to a point where an adult can actually, sit in back, he's still going to be hunched over. He or she's still going to be hunched over because of the lack of headroom, and you just compromised the leg room of the second row as well. So definitely a limited use third row, but the kind of thing that'll come in handy in a pinch. Fully competitive, better than you expect it to be. They deserve to really boost their market share in the compact crossover segment based on this new Outlander.
I think that's a good point. I think, we can just leave it there. Check out these reviews. Obviously on Autoblog. Is the Outlander up, or is that's going up
It went
later?
up today. It went up today.
Went up today. Got
Yeah.
it. Sounds good. Well, they're both up then. Check them out. Jump in on the comments, and it's always good to discuss our reviews. So let's move on to our listings. 2000. Yeah, we've got early 2000s to mid 2000s Pontiac GTO. This is a feature you may or may not have noticed, but if you haven't, check it out. We're kind of looking back at some of just used cars that you can obviously take a look at on Autoblog and make an offer if you're interested. To the people who are selling them. We just have the listings, but some of the cars are interesting. They resonate for a variety of reasons. One of my favorites is this mid-aughts GTO.
Mm-hmm.
That's a feature that by the time you're listening to this story will be live, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Why did this one kind of resonate for you, Jeremy?
Well, with this used car spotlight feature that we're doing, we're trying to pick out a vehicle that isn't top of mind for people who are out buying used vehicles. The GTO is easy to forget. First of all, it's been a decade and a half since this was a new vehicle. The Pontiac brand doesn't even exist, let alone the GTO. It was a limited production vehicle built on an Australian car and shipped over here with a classic American name. It was pretty expensive when it was new also. So I don't remember exactly the number, but over the course of the entire 3-year production run, I don't know, it was like less than 50,000 that they sold, 40,000, something in that range. So it's definitely one of those vehicles that flies under the radar. If you're not a Pontiac fan or up on your muscle car history, it's easy to forget the 2004 to 2006 GTO. You can read all about it in our used car spotlight that, as Greg said, will be live by the time you're listening to this. But some of the interesting statistics about it. In 2004, it came with a 5.7 liter V8, either a 4-speed automatic or 6-speed manual transmission. The one that's more desirable is the 2005 or 2006, because that's the 6-liter LS2 engine as opposed to the 5.7 liter LS1. bumped horsepower to an even 400 and a matching 400 pound-feet of torque. Again, 4-speed automatic or 6-speed manual transmission, rear-wheel drive, very luxurious, very comfortable. It's just an excellent daily driver that also happens to be able to do a quarter mile in 13 seconds flat. I mean, it shouldn't be a off the radar car, but it is. So we want to bring it back up, bring it back into people's minds. You know, if you're looking for something secondhand that is exciting, that you can enjoy driving, and maybe even has the potential to appreciate in value over the years, that 2004 to 2006 GTO deserves a look.
Certainly was a rare bird, if you will. I mean, this is just just an Australian car that was imported here, only sold for a few years, 2 slightly different V8s. And of course, this is during a time when, this is right on the edge of this new sports car performance horsepower war sort of thing. And that's, this is like when car companies were trying to sort of figure out if there even was a market for these types of cars. Pontiac was sort of struggling to try to survive, and they obviously didn't for much longer. But yeah, it's a cool car. It's one of my favorites. It's definitely kind of a B-side, a nuanced one that's very easy to slip into the dusty pages of history. They're out there. You can get them. Just checking out our listings, you can see one as cheap as about just a little under 10 grand if you're willing to take some miles on it. I thought they looked pretty good, but I will actually throw the Toyota 86 Subaru BRZ argument at this car, and that I did think it was a little too subtle. If you're going to put the GTO name on it, I was expecting something more like there were rumors floating around in this same time period of what they were going to do with the Impala, and it was really impressive. There were sketches that Bob Lutz would basically show anybody who asked. I don't know how serious they were, but I mean, there was a school of thought that GM, Chevy, Pontiac might go down the Charger route, if you will, that Dodge and Chrysler ended up going down, and they didn't. They just kind of dabbled with this. And then we did get the SS, I guess, and the Pontiac G8, but those were perhaps even more niche than the GTO actually was.
Yeah. But I actually mentioned both the G8 and the SS in the towards the end of the write-up on our used car spotlight and the GTO. Something to keep in mind is we're basically talking about a Corvette engine that they put into the Pontiac. And think back to this time, the Mustang made 300 horsepower. The Mustang GT made 300 horsepower in 2006. The GTO was 400 horsepower.
Right.
The Camaro didn't even exist at the time. It was on its hiatus, and the new one that coincided with the birth of the Transformers franchise, that was still several years off. And the Challenger didn't exist yet. The Dodge Charger and Magnum, they were out, but the Challenger didn't come for another couple years. And when it did, the RT had 375 horse from its Hemi V8. There was the 6.1 liter SRT8, which is kind of like a unique beast, in and of itself. But I'm bringing all this up as context as to why the GTO is worth your attention. No one thumbs their nose at a Challenger RT with the Hemi at 375 horsepower. You similarly shouldn't thumb your nose at a 2005 or 6 GTO with 400 horsepower, an available 6-speed manual transmission, and actually a pretty darn comfortable and luxurious interior.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, just to throw the spotlight back to that, the turn of the century, if you will, I mean, 400 horsepower at that time was a lot of horsepower. I mean, that was... And also, this is a pretty small car. I mean, you're getting a real hot rod here. Yeah. It's really something.
It's a 13-second quarter mile. I mean, yeah, that's fast. And it's an LS engine. I mean, there's nothing you can't do to an LS engine if you want to make the car faster. I mean, as a daily driver, as a fun little weekend getaway car, There's actually, I saw one. There's a 2005, I think. I don't remember for sure, but there's one here in Ohio for $12,000. And I saw it when I was, building this thing up, and I'm like, man, I'm convincing myself that I should go look at this thing as a second vehicle. I mean, I'm realistically not going to, but it's very compelling. Like, what's not to like about that?
We could leave it there. If you want to spend some money on that, I would totally support it. But how about we spend some more of Jacob and Colleen's money? We've now talked about them a couple times on the podcast. We're getting close to the point where maybe we should start giving them like screen credits or something. But in update, and Jeremy actually, when I was showing the letter here, had kind of a slightly an additional take on the earlier advice. So first things first, it sounds like Jacob is going to get a Bullet. That was one of the things he had mentioned for his sort of sports car idea. Test drove one and just liked it more than his 350Z. So doubled down, and he's going to go for that. So keep us posted there when you actually go ahead and buy it. Colleen actually gave us a little bit more of an update. She was actually looking to replace her Pilot, very anti-CVT. Likes to keep cars for a very long time. Thanks for the recommendations. This is from episode 670, if you want to go back and reference it. We can probably throw this letter in the body of the post here if you're looking. Thanks for the recommendations. Going to look at some of the Toyotas we recommended. Her next thing is she's going to go test drive a Highlander, a RAV4, or a 4Runner. I think that was one of my suggestions. Honda Passport, Kia Sorento, and maybe a Hyundai Santa Fe XL for the third row. Looking for a month to see if she's going to purchase or make a purchase decision. So that's kind of their update. They're narrowing the field. They're taking some of our suggestions. Thanks for writing, guys. But before we get out of here, Jeremy, you had some more advice.
Okay. So this is going to sound a little offbeat, I know. But based on everything she said, she doesn't like CVTs. She doesn't like crazy high-tech interiors with touchscreens everywhere. She likes, more of the traditional, gauge clusters and buttons and switches. She's really big into reliability. She says she's got 180-something thousand miles on her Honda, and she likes the idea of a reliable vehicle. She likes the rugged look. Because we suggested the 4Runner, she's going to go take one of those for a spin. She likes the Telluride too, but it's just a little bit too big. I crunched some numbers and I came up with an alternative that I don't think we brought up yet. And I'm giving this one from personal experience. I own a Lexus GX 460. It rides on the same platform as the Toyota 4Runner. She's looking to spend $30,000 to $35,000. I ran some figures. You can get a 2017 between $30,000 and $35,000 with less than 50,000 miles on it. This is an outlier. It's started out, it probably was a $55,000 to $65,000 vehicle when new. On the used market, they're pretty reasonable. 30 to 35,000. You mentioned Colleen, you were looking at 2017 and newer. In the case of the GX, you could look at a 15 or a 16 as well. They are the same thing. There weren't any changes to even talk about. They are one of the most reliable vehicles on the road today. If you run all the numbers from Consumer Reports, all the numbers from some of the other companies that do these things, IC Cars, Edmunds, everyone who does these things finds that the Lexus GX is one of the most reliable vehicles in the world. Another thing it's got going for it is safety. This was something that was near and dear to me before I bought my GX 460. If you look at, not to get morbid on it, but if you look at the FARS list, that's the fatality by miles rate, the Lexus GX is in the top echelon of vehicles you are least likely to die in an accident. So safety, check mark. Reliability, durability, check mark. One of the most reliable, durable vehicles that you can buy. And it's actually smaller than a Telluride. You think that they're pretty big. It's 4 inches narrower and something like 5 inches shorter, 4 or 5 inches shorter. A little bit taller. So if you've got, if the height is an issue, then forget it. But it does offer a third row and a sliding middle row. We use that third row from time to time. The one thing, you also mentioned get up and go. It's a V8, 6-speed automatic transmission. It's not super powerful, but it's got plenty of torque. It definitely doesn't feel underpowered in comparison to some of the other vehicles that you're probably driving or testing. The one thing is it's not going to get great gas mileage. We'll get, depending on who's driving, whether the air conditioning's on, how many people are in the car, stop and go traffic, I've seen as low as 15 miles per gallon. I usually get more like 16 and a half to 17 and a half in daily driving. On long highway trips, I get about 21 miles per gallon. So fuel mileage is not great, but it does check all of your other boxes. It's an outlier, but maybe give one a look if you can find one for sale near you. It's definitely more luxurious and substantial than some of the other vehicles you're looking at, and maybe you'll like it.
What year is yours?
Mine's a 2010, which is the first year that they went to the 460. It's actually the same 4.6 liter V8 that, very similar to what they put in the Toyota Tundra pickup trucks. Okay. Similar automatic transmission as well. I think one of the reasons why they're so reliable and durable is they've got these heavy duty engines that are made for pickup trucks and towing and hauling that, those cars kind of get abused from time to time. And a lot of the 4-wheel drive software comes from the legendary Land Cruiser. All the guts are extremely solid. It's worth looking at. I ultimately found that it fit my family needs. We're going to eventually replace it with something electric when that possibility comes up. We got our eye on a Rivian if they ever actually hit the market, and we can make it work financially. Give it a look. You said you like to keep your cars a long time, and if you're going to do that, getting one of the most reliable, one of the most durable options doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Very cool. That's good advice. Good advice from someone who actually has lived it and knows this vehicle inside and out. I concur wholeheartedly. So Jacob and Colleen, thanks for writing. Good luck with your purchases. Let us know how it all turns out in the end. We'll try to get some other people on this segment, but thanks for keeping us up to date.
Yeah, super interested in hearing what I'm wholeheartedly in approval with the Bullet. That's a great choice.
Yeah, for sure.
So, if Jacob goes with that, I think that's super cool. And I'm very curious to see how Colleen ends up too.
Sounds good. We'll leave it there. Thanks for the time this week, Jeremy. Everybody be safe out there, and we will see you next week.